one-week season.
OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes. We are back on Searching for Ceiling. This, the Week 14 edition. Week 14, and what a slate this is. There's a very clear path for we'll say the optimal allocation of salary, but we'll discuss that here shortly. As always, I'm joined by the great Rich Hribar, bringing him in. How are we this week, Rich?
We're doing good, man. It's, early December. It's cold outside here. Not cold where you are, I'm assuming, but I could use some degrees if you would pass them.
I'm wearing the jacket, man. I'm wearing the hoodie. It's actually cold. Oh my God.
But fun slate, man. I'm looking forward to this one. This is almost the quintessential Searching for Ceiling slate.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting spots, and obviously the chalk is going to develop, like the field is going a particular way, and that makes this slate so interesting. So we will dig into the hidden spots for Searching for Ceiling. And if you're looking for the macro slate kind of discussion, macro level theory stuff, head on over to 1 Week Season, get signed up for Inner Circle, because the Slate podcast, which is a 2-hour banger every single week on Saturday morning, this week is going to be very, very fun. We can't continue without first mentioning also head on over to Sharp Football Analysis or sharpfootballanalysis.com. Utilize code TAKE25. That'll get you 25% off anything they have over at that site, which includes all of my man Rich's great work. Without further ado, actually, I want to ask, how did last week go? Because I was so under the weather, dude, that I was just like struggling to make it through that session, that podcast, that I was, it was a struggle, dude. But I want to hear how your week went before we can.
Yeah, last week was good. A couple minor mistakes kept me out of like any like top winner circles, but had a lot of really good lineups in them streets. Last week was a week I actually felt good about the slate too, like that in the previous couple weeks, and we were on top of a lot of really good angles in last week that really helped us propel us to a really strong outing. So it was good. It was good to get in the winner circle after a couple of weird weeks where 1 week I didn't really play because I hated the slate. And then another just kind of got my teeth kicked in. So it was nice to get some back.
There we go. Let's go. So we're here at week 14, man. And when we're talking about Searching for Ceiling, I want to hear your thoughts first on the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, they put up just a beautiful game on Monday Night Football this previous week. But now, again, that was a fun one, right? Now they're coming up against a Pittsburgh Steelers team who is, defensively speaking, on par with their previous opponent in the Broncos. So I want to hear your take on them, and then we'll continue this bad boy.
Yeah, both these teams in general kind of have been trending higher than their season-long metrics since Jameis has taken over. The Browns games are 4-1 to the over. They've averaged a combined 51 points per game. That's third in the league over that span. Since Russell Wilson's taken over as a starter, Steelers games are 5-1 to the over, 51.7 points per game over that span too. So there is a chance for upside here. We did try to chase this a couple of weeks ago with like the Ravens Steelers game, and we thought it could get there, and it turned into a Ravens Steelers game, from yesteryear. It does that happen with Browns Steelers again, but the Browns in general are a team that is largely one-dimensional. They can't run the football. And, some of that is part, Nick Chubb, coming off of the injury. We heard Kevin Stefanski say that they just need to get more explosives in the run game. And that's why we saw Monday night Jerome Ford work in more to a larger split with Nick Chubb in the run game. It wasn't just game script stuff. They're trying to get bigger plays out of the run game that they haven't been able to get. So, but this team is literally predicated on one thing, man, and it's dropping back and winging the ball at Jameis Winston.
And it's a beautiful thing.
It is. You don't know what you're going to get down to down, but it has improved. I mean, this is 2 years in a row now. I mean, it just shows you how bad the Deshaun Watson experiment was. Like, he was just playing a different sport than these other guys. And Flacco and Winston do make mistakes, and they are turnover prone quarterbacks. And, I'm sure Kevin Stefanski, it drives him crazy that they have cost themselves probably some games from both versions of that. But at least this offense is competent now. It is a defense, like you said. On paper, you're like, we don't like they really attack the Steelers. They haven't given up any QB1 scoring games at all season. Burrow had the highest scoring game against them last week, and it was like 19 fantasy points. They are getting Alex Highsmith back as well this week, who leads the team in pressure rate per pass rush snap. It's not TJ Watt, so it is a development. We've seen Winston, when you can pressure Winston, that's when we start to see the goofy Jameis stuff happen. He's
Yeah.
25th in completion rate under pressure, 21st in sack rate. He takes a ton of sacks under pressure, and he's 26th in interception rate under pressure. But these teams did, go over in the snow on Thursday night a couple weeks ago in a short week. So there's optimism that this game can still kind of get there and has potential to have more upside than you would think Steelers Browns on the surface has.
Yeah, from an individual player standpoint, let's talk quickly about Jerry Jeudy and his record-setting game last week. What did you take out of that performance?
Well, it's what I've kind of been taking ever since, Jameis took over and Amari got traded. I mean, he's been their lead wide receiver. There was a span when it started, Cedric Tillman was having better results, but it was still Jeudy was literally running 100% routes on 100% of the dropbacks. He was moving around the formation more, where Cedric Tillman was basically playing like prototypical X. And they've been trying to get Jeudy the ball. And all of Jameis' starts, he's at least 5 catches in every start. So, like, when you look at him from a salary stance, he appears to be undervalued still for his utilization. On our Wednesday night show, I compared to like how he was being utilized. Like, what's the floor difference between Jerry Jeudy and like what Malik Neighbors is giving us? And there's like a $2,000 gap in salary. Like, not quite 2K, but you get what I'm saying. Like, you're getting at least a high floor here, and then you still have the potential to run into ceiling potential as well with Jerry Jeudy. So, I like the utilization. I like what they're doing with him. They're moving him away from cornerbacks too. Like we saw on Monday night, he didn't do anything against Patrick Surtain. He had 2 catches against Patrick Surtain.
Yeah.
But the good offenses can scheme away from one good defender. And that, the whole thing of what happened on Monday night is also a byproduct of where we've seen cornerback versus wide receiver analysis like really kind of fall off by the wayside. It was like when I was coming into like the industry, it was like really prevalent. It was like cutting at new, and NFL teams don't play man coverage really at all anymore. You're not seeing a lot of that. You have a couple teams like in the 40% range, but that's not even steady. Cornerbacks also, when you have an elite cornerback, they're rarely shadowing anymore either. Like they're not following a receiver around. Like a guy like Patrick Surtain doesn't go into the slot. So that's kind of where we've seen like that kind of fall off by the wayside. We don't have a lot of guys either like that anymore. The elite cornerback has kind of been something that's kind of dried out. We don't have the Revis guys anymore.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up is Joey Porter Jr. is probably one of the closest we have to one of these lockdown-esque type cornerbacks. He takes a lot of penalties against, but
that was what Snead did last year. Remember, Snead was really elite.
Yeah.
He was like the one guy that followed every round, but like he was so physical that he would have 2 penalties a game.
Yeah. That's kind of what Joey Porter Jr. is doing for us this year. Also, why I mentioned that on the Fantasy Points podcast last week, Scott Barrett mentioned that Fantasy Points did not think that Joey Porter Jr. was going to shadow because shadow Jamar Chase, because he has typically been utilized in a shadow based on his profile and his usage this season on like X-type wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
That is not Jeudy. So it'll be interesting to me to see kind of the usage split and the coverage alignment stuff from the Steelers here. But I do think that Jeudy carries some significant upside. He has the floor, like you mentioned, with Jameis under center, and he has some significant ceiling at only 5,700. So you're comparing him to players like Jacoby Myers, but that's probably a bad comparison because Jacoby's actually like a really good play. We'll talk about him in a little bit. I'm sure of it.
Listen, everyone's going to be shopping in that price range. The DraftKings build is going to basically have 3 guys in that price range. You're probably going to see Jeudy, Jacoby Myers, Calvin Ridley, and Juwan Jennings, like a combination of those guys, basically in almost 70-80% of lineups.
Yeah, that's the theory stuff that we'll talk about tomorrow on the Slate podcast. Yeah, and with that, like we kind of have this. I mentioned like I'll give a quick snapshot of like this theory discussion on where we expect the field to be going this week. It's very clear that it's going to be one of Saquon Barkley or Alvin Kamara paired with like an Isaac Rendo. That's kind of the starting point of 35% of the field. And when you're sinking that much salary into running back, we also have kind of, when you look at the state of the slate, we also have 3-4 pay up tight ends that are in fantastic spots, all the way down to Jonnu Smith. We'll talk about him here shortly as well. So when you have you have this general tendency of the field where we expect them to be paying a good chunk of salary at running back and a good chunk of salary at tight end. That's where we're seeing, that's how Rich can make this claim where we expect these wide receivers here in this mid-range in pricing tier to be owned heavily. And it's not just like comparing Jacoby versus Calvin Ridley versus Jerry Jeudy versus Jawan Jennings. It's the fact that like we expect at least one of these four guys who are priced very similarly to be on a huge chunk of rosters in play. We're talking maybe 80, 90% of rosters in play this week. So that is something we have to consider when we're considering salary allocation and stuff like that. To get the rest of that discussion, that will be covered on the Slate podcast, as I talked about. If you're not an Inner Circle member, head on over to 1 Week Season, get signed up for Inner Circle, and that will be live on Discord tomorrow. I believe we have a time change, so I'm not going to put that out just yet. Go to OWS Discord for the timing on that. But it is also released on the Inner Circle private podcast feeds on all of your, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, that's enough of that. Any interest on the other side with the Steelers? Any interest in George Pickens? How does this game kind of take off here?
Yeah, I mean, I always have a little bit of mild interest in George Pickens. He's had at least 74 yards in every game. Another guy that's had a higher floor than you probably assume that he's had since Russell Wilson's taken over. So you are getting the floor. He obviously has a huge upside, and we've seen again on Monday night. I mean, when the Browns give it up, they give it all up. Like, this is a very boomer bust pass defense. They are fourth in completion rate allowed. They're fifth in completion rate to throws to wide receivers, but they allow the most yards per completion and the most yards per completion to wide receivers. They're also 30th in touchdown rate to wide receivers. So when they do give it up, they do give it all because they're aggressive. They're one of the teams that do play a lot of man coverage. They do trust their defenders, and they put them in spots to win. And even the guys that are good, like Denzel Ward, will give up big plays. So they rely on that very boomer bust style. So you always have the potential to cash in like a huge play against them.
I dig it, man. One-off stuff. I like Jerry Jeudy. I think it is viable to play both Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore without Jameis. Just saying effectively, like the Browns are forced to pass a ton, and you're getting access to 30 plus potential targets out of that pairing. If we see Jameis dropping back 40, 45 plus times, which he has done multiple instances this season. So that is at least somewhat interesting to me. It's a little bit different than just saying like, hey, the touchdowns go through Elijah Moore. If you play them as a player block, you're effectively getting like a 10K wide receiver. And if you were paying, like, say if Justin Jefferson was seeing 20 targets a week and he's Justin Jefferson, like he would be priced at 10K. Would we play him at 10K would be the question. And that's effectively the same bet with this player block here. All right. Anything else to add on that game?
No.
Let's talk about this Miami football Dolphins team. The Dolphins have scored 27 or more points in 4 out of the 5 starts of the second coming of Tua Tagovailoa. And now we get this team against a Jets defense that is allowing like the second fewest passing yards, like second fewest, a lot of metrics through the air, second fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. And they are still like not, even though, all right, this is a weird situation because we've had reports coming out of New York that like the team is checked out mentally. I mean, that kind of makes a little bit of sense based on what they've been through this season. But if that's the case, there is some upside here. And I think there's some upside here from the Dolphins because the Jets came out from their bye and they played 60% too high. They played too high to 60% frequency out of their bye. That is a stark departure from how they had been handling their defense. And when you look at how the Dolphins have performed against too high, Tyreek Hill ranks 4th on the team in fantasy points per route run against too high this season. And he's always been like a man beater, a single high beater. But with the wrist injury and with everything that's going on with Tyreek, like he has fallen down the pecking order against too high this year. So do you see, my question to you is, do you see that trend of the Jets playing increased rates of too high as sticky, or is that something they did matchup specific coming out of their bye?
It could be something that we don't see as much. And the reason is that just because the Dolphins play a fullback with Alec Ingold back, and like kind of, offensive personnel will typically dictate a lot of, box defenders. So you might see them, kind of shift. But I mean, the Jets in general are always going to play like a lot of either too high, cover 4, cover 6 type stuff anyways, because that's the scheme. They might not have sauce. The other interesting, I mean, this Dolphins team is totally different than the previous 2 Mike McDaniel teams, and this team's really struggled to run the football. They've really just been a bad rushing team all year. Devin Achane has some of the worst rushing efficiency metrics in the NFL. It's just that he's found other ways to contribute in the offense. They've really kind of, what has replaced the running game is Devin Achane and Jonnu Smith in the pass game. Like,
Yeah, the short area attack.
This is why some of their target rates are just way up, and it's hurt guys like Tyreek and Waddle, even outside of the Tyreek injury stuff, is because the offense has had to calibrate for kind of some of their shortcomings. And kind of the workaround that Mike McDaniel's found is the yak game, right? And Jonnu's really good in the yak game. Achane's been really good, after the catch as well, way better than he has been after contact. So that's kind of what is kind of mitigated, or they've kind of calibrated, and that has been a big Jonnu signal. And Jonnu is kind of all kind of signals. Like last year, we would have circled this as a Waddle game. Like we would have 100% been like, this is a Waddle game. And now you look at like his splits against like cover 4 or cover 6, they're totally different. They're night and day. And where did all that go this year? To Jonnu Smith. It's all Jonnu Smith. Like all the splits that Waddle had where he was team high and target rate per out run against cover 4, cover 6, yards per out run, it's fallen to the bottom, and it's all Jonnu. Like he's got 38% of his targets, 37% target rate against cover 4, cover 6, almost 3 yards per out run. It's all him. And so, yeah, I mean, it's tough for me to believe they're going to get away from it, outside of just saying they might be able to have more rushing volume being home favorites, because we've seen them in this spot. They're at home, almost a touchdown home favorite, team total 26. So it's a signal that they'll at least have rushing attempts.
Speaking to Jonnu, if you look at this team's, and just across the board, if you look at this team's performance against too high this season, Jonnu Smith has 0.60 fantasy points per route run. He has a 0.29 targets per route run. You compare that to like you were talking about Jalen Waddle, who was this team's kind of too high cover 4, cover 6 type beater. Jalen Waddle's all the way down at 0.39 fantasy points per route run, and his targets per route run is, I just lost it. Where the hell did it go? I'll find it. 0.16. So it is very clear that this team has like fundamentally altered how they are approaching attacking too high. And we're talking about too high. Like this is a defensive alignment that is pretty much predicated and built to remove like deep passing. It is built to cover more area on the back end. And you can do a lot of things from too high. Like you can sneak the strong safety down in the box against the run if you diagnose a run. But the fundamentals of these coverages that the Jets are running is built to take away like deep passing. So that's the area where Jalen Waddle had been so successful, is a lot of stuff out of the slot, a lot of seam, a lot of slant and goes, a lot of like upside inducing crossing route type stuff against too high to manipulate, with Tyreek manipulating one of those safeties. That's where like Waddle has been in the past so effective against it. But when you look at like the Jets and how deep they play in their secondary, like this screams Jonnu to me. I know, like you look at the season long efficiency metrics, like the Jets have allowed like bottom 5 fantasy points per game to tight ends, but like this is a different spot to me. So I think there's significant upside here with Jonnu. We're talking like, I would not be surprised if he comes out of this game with another double-digit target game. Would not be surprised if he goes over 100 yards with that yak upside. Would not be surprised if he puts up 25 to 30 fantasy points again. So yeah, how do you feel about Jonnu? And then we'll talk about the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably my favorite Dolphin in this game. Obviously, I'll never twist anyone's arm saying that you can't play Devin Achane, especially as a home favorite, right? Where he might actually be under-owned for one of the few times this season, maybe, because of the Kamara Saquon stuff. Just kind of everyone kind of gravitating to those two guys. That's gonna be interesting too. The way we play the other running backs is the other unique part of the slate, but playing a good tight end is one of the unique ways to play the slate in general. It's just something that we're probably not going to see a lot of gamers get pushed to, especially if they try to jam in both Saquon and Kamara. Like you really can't you can't get to Bowers, you can't get to McBride. I think Kittle is in a really intriguing spot this week, especially from the way to play the slate. So I've been toying around trying to figure out how I want to play the tight end spot for sure, because I feel like that's one of the ways to get unique here.
You play two of them. We'll see. The reason I mentioned the Jets splits and the too high utilization is their season average and too high utilization is 43.4%. So it jumped to 60%. It's almost a 50% increase here out of their bye. So if that remains, that is a clear signal to me that this is a Jonnu game. But we don't know. It was a sample size of one game out of their bye. You know, they had their bye at week 12. They come out in week 13 and play 60% too high. So we don't know if that was matchup specific. We don't know if that's a sweeping change that they instilled over the bye. So just something to consider there that goes beyond like Jonnu Smith is big and fast and scores fantasy points. The Jets, man. Any interest in the Jets at all?
Not much.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I mean it's mostly due to the, like you said, the vibes, the state of the offense. I mean this offense basically since like week 8 has looked lost. It's a struggle to generate big plays. They're constantly in long down and distances on third downs. Since week 8, they're 30th in the NFL in set of downs that reach third down. Only the Bears and Panthers are worse than them over that span.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like the Texans.
Yeah, it's just real tough, man, for a guy like, and you know, we're starting to see this a little bit too with the Falcons, where we have seen it all year. Like, it's just tough with these quarterbacks that can't move. You can't run any play action. They don't want to turn their backs to the defense. You can't do anything creative. And the NFL is kind of predicated on doing some of that stuff now.
Yes. I'm glad that you mentioned the Falcons and the fact that we've been on them being bums all year. It's lovely. Love it. Another team, segue alert, another team that we've been down on all season are the Cardinals. The Cardinals get their second game against the Seahawks in the last 2 calendar weeks. They played each other and then in week 12, and then they didn't week 13. Now they're back to playing each other. And this is still the tightest division in football. What do you make of this spot? Is it likeliest? I think, well, I guess before I ask you the question, last time we talked about this game, we talked about the fact that it had an extremely wide range of outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these teams could both be playing to go out and steal a victory because it was a borderline must-win game in a tightest division of football, and they could play it not to lose, and they kind of played it not to lose. But the wide range of outcomes still exist. So How do you see this game this week developing?
Yeah, and especially in context of where that game was on the slate 2 weeks ago versus this one, right? Where, you know, we've got a lot of games with wide ranges of outcomes. So this could be a spot where you just can't really look at too, even though I believe same thing. Like both these teams are going to want to like really kind of play this game tighter, probably, you know, to rely on the bend but don't break defense that's been going on at both these teams for the last month plus. And the Cardinals in general, it's the same story as always, right? Like I was just on with Davis Maddock, and he was talking about like how he was kind of intrigued because their pass rate over expectations been up, and I'm like, that's a negative for this team. Like, this team, it can't operate when they're not playing complementary football. The problems with this offense are highlighted when they're forced to throw the football. When the opponent knows the Cardinals have to throw, everything about this offense kind of gets worse. And they've really struggled to run the football the past 3 games. James Conner's at 3 yards per carry the past 3. The Seahawks defense has been playing a lot better against the run too. So it's just the same thing. If they're not able to come out and run the ball at James Conner and they're forced to throw, do we see just the continued issues of this offense? But also, what if they can? And we kind of see some more, you know, more upside from this team. So that still exists. I still think that there is a potential path here. The problem is from this game in general is it's hard to play this game from a salary stance. You know, JSN's been really bumped up the past couple weeks in salary. He's still palatable on DraftKings. He got jammed at FanDuel. He's 8K on FanDuel, which is like laughable to me. Like that's a laughable price for JSN.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, you can wax politically on the upside here because I'm still in the same boat where like, we can play it differently because the slate's different, but still see that kind of the median of this game being a low 20s at outcome.
Yeah, the one pass catcher on the Cardinals that does, like, for the first time all season, like 2 weeks ago, I labeled him as like an upgrade. I do like a recap stuff for fantasy points, like a market moving report, we call it, or market report. And for the first time all season, like I labeled Trey McBride as like an upgrade because he is the one pass catcher in this offense that succeeds within the structure of the pass offense because like Kyler Murray is a bum throwing downfield right now because we're seeing Marvin Harrison Jr. utilized like exclusively intermediate to deep. He's not getting like he had one game where he saw like 5 slant routes. It's like, yay, hooray, you did it.
Yeah, this Dolphins game.
Yeah, dude. Outside of that, it's like he's just running the same routes, and it's like he can't overcome that within the structure of this offense. But like Trey McBride is the one guy that does strike my fancy a little bit because he has many more paths to success. He can succeed within the structure of the offense, which we know the structure of the pass offense is not good. And he can also succeed like if structure breaks down because he is capable of getting open on his own. So he's the one guy that I would play like as a one-off type from this game. Potentially paired with JSN. I don't know yet. How do you see the Seattle side? You mentioned JSN. Anybody else there?
Yeah, I think from a matchup stance, I would love to play just like if you're going to play it, just play the JSN McBride mini. But I think JSN kind of gets frozen out of the player pool. I think when we start to weed out just the number of plays on this slate and then have comparable, floors and upside, right? Like what's the discernible difference really between Judy and JSN, right? Like,
yeah.
And especially one might offer a little bit more upside, but he has had more receiving yards than DK Metcalf in every game since Metcalf came back. We start to see some stuff kind of flow through him. Tyler Lockett's basically just been phased out of this passing game.
Yeah.
Like
he's dust.
Yeah.
But
McBride is still the only guy that like really excites me from like, I want to put him in a lineup from this game.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
If the slate was different, I could maybe kind of talk myself into Kenneth Walker again, but I don't think I can.
I toyed around early week with a Kyler McBride JSN kind of mini game correlation. I don't know how I feel about it now, to be honest.
I still show Kyler like drawing interest on the slate, and I don't know how static that will be.
It's so hard to buy into Kyler at ownership this year. Well, ever for me, but
the next 3 weeks, I will say, if you've gotten this far with Cardinals, the next 3 weeks look pretty good.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, their schedule kind of opens up. They have one of the easiest strength schedules remaining, don't they?
Yeah. The 3 playoff, like the fantasy playoff games, so to speak, all look pretty juicy.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for James Conner just to get all the work.
Here we are. And this is your Cardinals. Arizona.
Yep.
Congratulations. Keeping in the theme of the tight ends, man, we got to talk about what Aiden O'Connell and Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers are doing in Las Vegas. They get a matchup against the clearly pass funnel Bucs. We've been attacking this defense the entire season, and now we get my dog's barking in the background. Now we get.
Is that a good sign? Is that a good take?
Like I think that's a good thing, dude.
The dog likes Aiden O'Connell.
I think that's a good thing. We've had like such a concentration amongst Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers over the last 4-ish weeks. How do you see it playing out this week in now a pass funnel spot?
Yeah, this is probably the ugly duckling good game, right? And people might get here naturally because it has what we look for. The cheap quarterback on a slate where really, if you don't get shadow realmed by Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, is wide the hell open. Like just wide open outside of those two guys. And the way the Eagles have been not throwing the football, Jalen Hurts has not been doing that, but it's the Panthers, so we can't rule it out either. So I think you're going to see just a lot of wide range, stacks from like typical like streaming types of guys this week. I mean, you're going to see Sam Darnold, you're going to see Will Levis, you're going to see Aiden O'Connell because he's 4,800 on DraftKings. And what makes Aiden O'Connell more appealing? Well, one, I had the stat in the worksheet too about Aiden O'Connell. His last 6 full games he's played, he's been a QB1 scorer in 4 of them.
Yeah.
So like he's not just like a floor guy. Like he's actually had some upside, going back to last year. His 2 starts this year, one was against the Steelers, who obviously not many teams have gotten there against them. That was his other full game. And then last week he threw for 340 in Arrowhead. The Chiefs haven't been at nearly as good a defense the past month, given some of the moving parts that they've had, but it's still 340 in Arrowhead with 2 touchdowns, which is a significant number. And what we like too is that it's just a concentrated target tree. They throw a ball to 2 guys. And you can put them together if you want. If you want to run doubles, if you want to pick one, it's going to Jacoby Myers and the ball's going to Brock Bowers. There is a little kind of like, I don't know if it's not, I don't want to call it a negative signal because I don't think it matters because the target volume for Jacoby Myers, but I've been tracking the Bucks with both their cornerbacks, with Zion McCollum and Jamil Dean, because we talked about this last week, getting to Thielen over David Moore. Why Thielen was a way better play than everyone playing 3K David Moore is with Jamil Dean and Zion McCollum back. I mean, they've only allowed a 56% catch rate and 10.4 yards per catch to outside receivers. Those for the full season would rank 5th and 1st in the NFL. And since they've traded Devontae Adams, Myers has been outside for 75% of his snaps. So there is some like kind of like negative matchup signal here, but also like he did get over on the Chiefs too last week. So when you have that type of volume, like you always start at the volume first over the matchup when you're talking about a player. And then Bowers just has both, best of both worlds, right? Like the Buccaneers have been a target for us all year against tight ends. If you punted with Tommy Tremble, you enjoyed the fruits of that last week too, because they're terrible against the middle of the field. They blitz, they play zone coverage this year behind the blitzes. Like they're playing a lot more coverage. So the middle of the field is where you want to attack the Buccaneers. So Brock Bowers comes in just another tremendous spot. I wouldn't be surprised if he has another 10 plus targets easy in this game.
Yeah, and we look at the Buccaneers. One game out of their last 9 has failed to go over 43 points. So like they're scoring and they just continue to give up production. So that piques my fancy for sure. I think Aiden O'Connell plus both of his pass catchers is completely viable. I think it is completely viable to pick onesie twosies out of the pass catchers, and I think it's completely viable to play them together without Aiden O'Connell. The bet there is just that they see 30 combined targets, but Aiden O'Connell does not go over 300 and throw for 2 touchdowns or 250 and 3. So I think any and all of that is viable here. Staying away from the backfield, obviously. How do you see the other side? We have some interesting happenings going on. Mike Evans, hamstring and calf, I believe. And I don't know. I think it's on the same leg, which would make sense because knee bone is connected to the thigh bone and how all that shit works. But Mike Evans has yet to practice this week. We're waiting on that report today.
They both practiced today.
Who's that?
Him and Bucky. I forgot.
Bucky.
They both came back today to practice. So yeah, Bucky is a little interesting on this slate too, because of the ownership, how hot he's been running, and just how banged up is he. We don't really know, right? Like we don't.
Yeah.
He had a career high 28 touches on Sunday and only had 1 touch the final 3 drives of the game because he was just covered in ice. Like, just really going through it. And, it's a bummer they put him on that kickoff return because I think he got banged up on that kickoff before halftime. But I do wonder if we're going to see just maybe a slight reduction. I still think he's the guy, but if there is just like a slight reduction or if there's a risk that he could aggravate something in game, that just it exists in the range of outcomes this week is all I'll say. And we did see this a little bit with Devin Achane last year because, Bucky is a tough runner. He gets a lot after the tackles, but he is 190 pounds. And when Devin Achane, his first year in the NFL, started to get extended workload, we started to see Devin Achane pick up nicks and bruises and start to get kind of chipped away at. And I do wonder if that also is what we've seen now out of the bye, that they've said, all right, Bucky, you're our guy, come get your touches. And then he's kind of been overworked a little bit the last 2 weeks. And I do wonder if that's happened as well, but it's hard to completely fade him. As good as he's been, home favorite, touchdown, mid-team total in the 20s. We just laid all this out for the Dolphins. Evans would be the guy that still kind of stands out for me. Played a ton of him last week. He was a guy that really got me through and over last week. We haven't seen Nate Hobbs practice either yet. And since they haven't had Nate Hobbs, the Raiders, that is, they've, DeAndre Hopkins had 90 yards. And if DeAndre Hopkins could have had a huge game if he just played the whole game, the Chiefs still just don't play him. Cortland Sutton had 97-2 the week before. Baker Mayfield has talked about, they're cognizant that Mike Evans to get him this 1,000 yards.
1,000-yard watch. Yeah. He needs almost 100 per game.
It's 95.8 per game. So let's call it 96 per game. Like they know. I mean, you love the target since he's been back because we knew this was going to happen, right? And he was on the field for 90% of the dropbacks against Carolina. he has what we were looking for him to get. He's been targeted on 29 and 34% of his routes since coming back, over 3 yards per out run. Good matchups in both those two, but apparently could run into another one without Nate Hobbs. Still like Mike Evans too. Pay up receivers, again, probably not going to be a lot of ownership on these guys this week.
Yeah, 100%. Love Mike Evans. Love the shout on Bucky. Those are really the only 2 spots where I see myself going. And I was just waiting on injury news really for both of those guys.
Is Baker too high of a price on this slate for you, or?
I don't think anybody is too higher price at quarterback on this slate. It's literally, there's 2 quarterbacks that are priced above 6,400 and Baker's at 6,400. So it's like, once you get below like 7K, it's just kind of one, like 7K to 6K in quarterback is just kind of one big tier for me. So like it matters not really, as long as he's below 7K. So I don't think so. It is, I guess, in the same vein, it is at least notable that like he had gone 4x his salary multiplier in 5 of his first 8 games. If you know, it was like 4 plus an almost, and he hasn't sniffed it in the last month of play. So that is at least noteworthy, we'll say.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was like asking, like getting like, it's like,
yeah,
is it
yeah,
a spot where if you play Evans, you just play Evans is basically?
I think so. That's probably the likeliest outcome here, we'll say. But on a slate, like as you mentioned, it is so wide open as far as who do we primarily correlate, who do we team stack. I don't hit it at all. Yeah, probably not the likeliest scenario, but definite in the MME bucket for us this week.
Like it.
Anything else to add on that game?
No, but it is a fun. AOC stacks are fun, and we're just Raiders one-offs, a la cartes, I think are just really great.
Yeah. I'll throw it to you, man. Is there a game that we have not discussed yet that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to talk about the 49ers game just for the layers that it has. Obviously, it's going to have maybe not the most popular player on the slate, but Guerendo is probably going to be in every lineup. I assume most people that are playing at like MME stuff are going to make a rule where they have one of Saquon, one of Kamara, and then with Guerendo, like he's the other guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I imagine that's a very popular thing. So like whenever you have a player that's that popular, it becomes, interesting from a slate perspective, because the 49ers have multiple other ways and players that are that can open things up and be leveraged against Isaac Guerendo. Obviously, if you have Guerendo in your flex spot on DraftKings, you can go in the 11th hour and do a lot of movement with him because if you need him or not, right? Versus everyone else having him. You actually have Juwan Jennings, $200 cheaper than him on DraftKings. Guerendo on FanDuel is going to be in everywhere. He's cheaper actually on FanDuel than he is DraftKings, which is you don't really ever see for a running back.
Yeah.
But you have pivots, and then you have, George Kittle. George Kittle, to me on this slate, because we've seen when Christian McCaffrey's been out, the target share George Kittle's had this year. Because and I don't think Guerendo, he's going to be on the Mason path where I don't see him being involved in the pass game. So I do see Kittle being in a really great spot this week. And I feel like if people are playing tight ends, they're going to do what we talked about in the 2 previous games. They're going to play one of Bowers or McBride or Jonnu, or and Kittle, I just feel like he's in a really great spot. He leads the team in end zone targets. He leads all tight ends in yards per out run. We've seen the past 2 weeks, the Bears on Thanksgiving gave up 2 touchdowns to Laporta. The week before that, they gave up over 100 yards to TJ Hawkinson. They're 22nd in yards per target to tight ends. The Bears also play cover 3 44% of the time, the 3rd highest rate in the league. And against cover 3 this season, George Kittle, 3 yards per out run. I think Kittle is arguably one of my favorite plays on the slate.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The only thing that is kind of crossing my mind is we know the Bears. Well, actually, let me check their pressure rate. I just had it.
I think they're 6th in the NFL.
Yeah, they're up there, right? They are. They're 3rd on the slate, 35.6% pressure rate. And we look at who Guerendo is. This dude is 6 foot, big back, runs really fast, 4 threes, right?
Somewhere 4 threes. 220 pounds, 4.340.
Yeah. But what this team has not done is place him in pass catching repetitions.
No.
So that is my only hesitation on Kittle. And I've been going back and forth. Like he's very clearly an immense leverage play this week. But yeah, as is noted in the chat, like Trent Williams is also out. They have an opponent that is capable of generating pressure, and we don't expect Garendo to be utilized in like pass protection. So that is my only concern.
But we haven't seen that. This has always been a narrative that's never been true with Kittle, though. Like he doesn't stay in pass blocks. Like he runs like on the terms of actual dropbacks or Purdy, like he never is like hindered.
He does a lot of like chip stuff though.
He's running routes. Like the whole Kittle as a blocker thing, like has never really been true on a drop back, like a route per drop back stance.
Yeah. So like when it's a clear pass play design. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So that's the only thing that I've been wrestling with this week with Kittle and Garendo is like, how is it likeliest to play out? Like if Chicago is keeping pace, if Chicago is, pushing the 49ers, that's where we see the potential for Kittle for me. Because he's not a guy that is likely to see more than 7-8 targets even with Christian McCaffrey out. So you're betting on the touchdowns flowing through Kittle as opposed to Garendo. I think that's a fine bet to make. Especially with the ownership delta, how it fundamentally alters like your salary allocation and your roster build. More on that tomorrow. But yeah, that's a very, very interesting shout and something to think about and consider heavily on this week.
And this game in general, I think has, a definite path to upside as well. I mean, both these defenses have been playing significantly worse the back half of the year. Obviously, it looks like we're not going to have Nick Bosa again, too. The 49ers without Nick Bosa are 31st in pressure rate this year with him off the field. Over their past 4 games, they're 30th in points allowed per drive. We've seen the Bears be capable under Thomas More. Like they've still had spouts where like we're not through the woods with the Bears, but like they've at least been capable and they've had more counterpunch. And then this Bears defense, since their week 7 bye, the Bears are allowing the most yards per play in the NFL. Yeah. So like this game has the pieces, not just from a leverage stance that I think are unique, from an upside stance. I mean, because not only is Kittle potential leverage on Garendo, he's also potential leverage on Juwan Jennings, who's going to be immensely popular on DraftKings. And the one thing the Bears have done, which again, I don't think it matters for a 5,200 wide receiver, but the Bears have been awesome against wide receiver ones this year. I mean, they are allowing the fewest points per game to wide receiver ones this season. In the past 2 weeks, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 5 for 73 on Thanksgiving. Justin Jefferson, 2 for 27 before that. So that's another path for Kittle to get over. And then we'll have to see on Friday, if DeAndre Swift practices today, but Roschon is already not going to play. He had 100% of the backfield touches on Thanksgiving. And since their week 9 bye, the 49ers, 160 yards and 2 touchdowns to the Tampa Bay backs. They allowed 170 yards and 3 touchdowns to the Green Bay running backs. But on Sunday night, they couldn't stop Buffalo in the snow. And then you also have Keenan Allen in this game too, and is an interesting play too in that price range of all, because he's not going to be owned in that price range of the wide receivers we talked about. But the 49ers have been vulnerable against slot receivers all year long. So he's also a guy that has touchdown equity too. So this game is very interesting. There's a lot of ways to play this game, I think.
Yeah, I like that shout, especially with the state of the Chicago backfield. That is something to keep an eye on.
Someone said Bears giving up big games to Iowa tight ends. That's the best narrative we've got going.
Yeah. Did you say did Swift return to practice today?
I don't know. I didn't see that one. I did see the Bucks guys before we got on.
Yeah. Because Roschon has the concussion. He did not practice yesterday. Highly unlikely to play. And Swift's got the quad injury going on. At least it's not a hamstring. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, does Caleb have any interest on this slate?
Well, that's an interesting question. I haven't considered it even.
Because he's been running under Thomas Brown, and the 49ers historically have been a team that there's a defensive scheme that gives up rushing productions to running backs. They're 24th in rushing points allowed per game to quarterbacks. So on a slate like this, we've seen him get over 20 points the past 2 games or 3?
2 games, 26.14 and 29.9 the last 2, yeah.
Yeah, does he become interesting on this slate?
I think he might, dude. I might have to look into that a little bit more. Who do you like him with? Is it Keenan Allen?
I think Keenan's my favorite on the surface from a matchup stance.
Yeah.
And then also where we're talking salary, I think he fits. But
Can you play? I guess you could. I was thinking, can you play Caleb with DeAndre Swift and Keenan?
you could.
That's a little bit more appealing to me than like going to Roma Dunze or even
Yes.
DJ Moore.
We've tried to force the Rome thing so many times.
Yeah, I know, dude. God, it's
Or
there.
Martingale. Him and Tyreek have been Martingale to death, it feels like.
Yeah. Interesting. DJ Moore didn't practice Thursday either. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, that game in general, I feels like it's not getting as much attention, and maybe it will, but because Jennings and Garendo are going to be popular regardless because of their salaries.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I wonder if you could like game stack it up, man. Like play the
and
Bears,
still just get a piece of it. Yeah,
yeah, play the Bears and then bring it back with like one of Garendo or Kittle or both of them. I mean, if that, it's unlikely that that is the game that takes off, but this slate is filled with unlikely games that could take off. So that's interesting. I gotta chew on that a little bit more this afternoon. The old Caleb Williams Bears here. Anything else to
I'll
add
try to
on
find
this game?
I was gonna try to look up the Trent Williams on-off splits for Kittle too. I'll see if I can find him before the end of the show.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That would be awesome. Let's see here. Any other games you want to talk about until we get into the out the door stuff? You want to? There's a whole lot of middling stuff going on here. Any interest in Atlanta, Minnesota? Quickly.
I mean, I'm definitely interested in Justin Jefferson.
Dude, he has been the enigma of this DFS season, man.
He has no game over 25 PPR points, right?
Yeah, one game, double-digit targets. He's highly likely to see 7 to 9 targets. Like he's just going to, but like at the same time, like highly unlikely to see double-digit this year. This team has just fundamentally changed how they're approaching games due to a defense that is outstanding under Brian Flores. So that kind of comes down into like, can Atlanta push them?
Yeah, that's my one kind of concern right now because when you look at Kirk Cousins versus everything Brian Flores wants to do, he's been awful in all those things. Terrible against the blitz outright, terrible against zone blitzes. He hasn't even thrown a touchdown against his own blitz this season. Just can't move. And like I am definitely concerned. I am absolutely concerned about that.
Yeah, dude. And you look at like the Falcons, like they're a team that is beating who they should beat, which is like their division. But outside of their division, dude, they have one game over 21 points, over 22 points. They scored 22 against Philly in week 2. The only other time this team has scored more than 20 points against a non-division opponent this season was against Dallas in week 9 when they put up 27. Yeah. It's like everywhere else they go, they are just a mediocrity. I don't know, a modicum of mediocrity. There it is. I don't know. I'm continue to be down on Atlanta. Same thing as Cardinals, but I don't know. Can they push them here? Can they push the Vikings?
We know.
Yeah, unlikely. But God, this slate, man, just full of unlikely.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing I'm trying to wrap my head around at the slate is just the event because Garendo, given his salary, is like a tough outright fade because of where he's priced. But Saquon Barkley at his price, if you can just run into a game where he has the 130 and one touchdown or 130 and no touchdowns, at his salary, what then if you don't have him? Where do you use that salary and where can you have it be like an eruption spot too to kind of combat even if you don't have him and he does go off, right?
All roads lead to Mike Evans, dude. That's all I'm hearing.
That's kind of how, you got to have that guy that has to be leverage on Saquon if he has the good game or if he has the bad game, right? And Justin Jefferson, I still think is one of those guys that has a high enough floor to match still a Saquon floor game. And then if we do get the spot where, because the reason I do like Justin Jefferson still from a context of this game is just the way the Falcons play defense, right? And we haven't seen him face a defense that plays like this type of coverage scheme since the Gus Bradley game. And that was when he had
so far off.
That's when he's seen the season high 137 yards he had was against that in that Colts game. So, and the Falcons have been absolutely destroyed by wide receiver ones this year, like absolutely destroyed. So,
and pretty good against the run.
So I've been just trying to find ways to say, like, all right, if I make a lineup without Saquon Barkley, theoretically, who has the floor and upside to match Saquon Barkley still to where where I'm not getting shadow realmed by Saquon still.
Yeah, just pull the bottom up build mentality and build with a 44% or 44K salary. Just leave 6K on the table. It's fine. The one game that we didn't discuss, dude, that probably we should is the Bills and the Rams. We have the Bills coming out of winter wonderland and into lovely SoCal. How are you seeing this spot? We'll touch it quickly in the next 5 minutes, and then we'll get the out the door stuff.
Yeah, real tricky spot, I think, for DFS. The Bills always have been all year. They're a team that scores 30 points, and we can never play any of their guys because they rotate so many players. But I mean, there are some intriguing one-offs on a slate like this for sure. Josh Allen also happens to be one of the quarterbacks that can drag us to the nether realm. That's always in play. If Josh Allen has 30 and you do play him as like an a la carte item, that exists in the range of outcomes. I do have very, very mild, like more like it's just a one thrower off in Amari Cooper this week. And it's just kind of where he's playing. The problem is he's not playing a lot of snaps because they rotate all these guys. He hasn't had a game where he's had a over 70% route rate in a game since he's joined the Bills, but he is playing 85% of his snaps out wide, and 23% of his targets come on deep throws 20 yards or further downfield, where that's where we've been attacking the Rams this year. A league high 11 yards per target outside receivers. They've allowed the most touchdowns on throws 20 yards or further downfield to wide receivers. And you can say, well, Keon Coleman's coming back. That could also be a signal for him too, right? But Keon Coleman has very drastic splits versus man and zone coverage. Like it's almost triple the difference. He's been targeted on 26% of his routes against zone, man coverage, only 11.8% against zone coverage. So, and we're not getting any man coverage from the Rams, So Cooper, very mild, just at a salary, like as a one-off, like trying to luck box into something is basically what I'm saying is like the one guy I have. If we weren't going to have Dalton Kincaid, I probably would have been more interested in Dawson Knox, but it looks like Kincaid's going to play.
Yeah, they're getting a slew of supporting cast back here. On the other side, we have Cooper Kupp, who's like really, really good red zone role, but very, very low ADOT beyond that. And then you have kind of Puka Nacua, who is the alpha. But you have a Bills defense who is not giving up hardly anything to opposing wide receivers. How do you see the Rams here?
Yeah, this is what's kind of fun, right? The strength on strength matchup, because the Bills want to play a lot of bend but don't break defense. Their defense is literally predicated on not giving up shot plays in the passing game. They're number one in the NFL in rate of passing plays to go for 20 or more yards, the lowest that is. But so as a byproduct, they face a lot of targets to tight ends and running backs. Guess who doesn't do that?
Yeah,
the Matthew Stafford has the highest target rate to wide receivers in the NFL. And the one thing that gives me some confidence is that we were in this spot, a similar spot a couple weeks ago against Vic Fangio, and like the Rams wide receiver still got there in that game. And so I don't really have a lot of concern about the Rams wide receivers not getting theirs. I think they will. Kyren Williams becomes interesting on the slate though, because again, another good spot for him. They had their offensive line intact for the first time all season last week. Played all 5 starting offensive line for the first time. And the one way to kind of beat the Bills is in the run game. If we can kind of hang around here, 41% of the fantasy points allowed by the Bills have gone to running backs this year. It's the highest share in the league. They just don't really throw to Kyren is kind of the one bugaboo. Like you need the touchdowns for him. But he does become a little bit interesting because he does have multiple touchdown upside still too. So
yeah, I'm
he was a lot more explosive with those running back with the offensive line healthy last week. And it was the Saints, so we need to see the sample grow. But he was a lot more explosive, had his highest rate of explosive runs in a game and his highest success rate per rush with that offensive line attack last week.
Yeah, I mean, you say it was the Saints. They're allowing 2.69 yards before contact per attempt. The Bills are right there with them at 2.54. So similar spot here. All right, man. Out the door stuff. Give me your vomit inducers.
Well, Mari is one.
That's a good one.
And I don't know. I don't think the Titans guys qualify, but I mean, Tony Pollard definitely becomes interesting on the context of the slate, just where the running back salary is going to go, and then if people are going to overplay Will Levis as a home favorite, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with playing Will Levis. You know, if he ends up being your cash game quarterback and you're getting to Ridley stacks, you're getting to NWI doubles or Conquo punts. But the Titans are home favorites, which they've not been in a spot like this very often against this Jaguars
Yeah.
team that is very much circling the drain. Like, objectively, this is a good spot for the running back. So if we get like a really high Titans ownership on their passing game, then Tony Pollard has to be on your board.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's likelier than not that the Titans kind of control that game environment too. So good ups
And
for
you get
Tony
the
Pollard.
BTJ oneer. Like, you can just do a BTJ Tony Pollard mini.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
And
hate
walk
that
away.
one bit. Even like Tony Pollard plus Titans defense works as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, here's one for you. Michael Woods the second. Who that? Who dat? This dude, practice squad player for the Cleveland Browns. He was elevated last week because Cedric Tillman was inactive and played 77% of their offensive snaps. That was 2 more offensive snaps than Elijah Moore. He saw, what was it? He saw only like 3. He saw 5 targets, caught 3 of them for 43. But if we're looking at like if Jerry Judy's going to get steamed this week, which I don't know if he will, but if he does, Michael Woods at bare minimum 3K on DraftKings could give you enough flexibility to play like both Saquon and Alvin Kamara. Just do some stupid stuff. That's going to be my out the door
I like it.
kind of
Yeah.
potential. I mean, you're looking for 15 points out of him at 3K, and that might not even matter this week. But thought it was interesting to at least mention. Any other parting shots, dude?
No, I do have the splits, the Kittle stuff. Trent Williams off the field, George Kittle on the field. He's run a route on 94% of the pass plays on those.
Okay.
So, like, if they're still calling pass plays, he's not really. I still don't think he's going to be in blocking.
Yeah, not affected. Okay. Well, that's good. Okay.
I mean,
Thanks
he's
for
like I
digging
said.
that
I
up,
mean,
dude.
Kittle to me definitely stands out. And again, like you said, though, the target, you can't expect the target volume.
Yeah.
But we were in a spot a couple weeks ago with Kittle, with Brandon Allen without Trent Williams, and he cooked too. So, but,
Yeah. Sweet, man.
and I just like the leverage stuff too, because the 49ers guys are going to be
Yeah,
so
that's a
hot.
big. That is big. That is big for sure. You're kind of you're almost triple dipping on leverage because we didn't even talk about the fact that playing Kittle means you're not playing some of these other high price tight ends. So
Is Kittle
this
the double tight end? Well, that I would say this
maybe,
about George Kittle and what I laid out. If Guarendo's in your flex, you'll know if you need Guarendo or not, right? Versus the field,
hmm
because you'll know. Kittle needs to be on the menu for the late swap.
it would almost make sense to build it the reverse to have Kittle in the flex
And then go to Guarendo.
and go to Grendo because
That
I think
makes, yeah.
Kittle is 500 more than Grendo. Is
I
that
think he's,
right?
yeah, 5'8" and 5'4", right?
Okay, yeah, so 400 more. Or mess around with some of the defenses in the afternoon portion of the slate, but that might not be as desirable.
Yeah, I mean,
Sweet.
the great thing about the Guarendo being kind of chalky is that he is in the 4 p.m. slate, and you'll know if you need to come off or eat the
Yeah.
chalk.
Yeah.
Whereas, all these other guys are going to play. The only other 4 p.m. tight end is McBride. So if you play Bowers, if you play Jonnu early, you can still you're not roadblock still, where you can still play Grendo, and then you can have Kittle as a pivot there as well still too. So
Yeah. I'm
definitely just
wondering,
want to keep him in mind for the late swappers. I know not everyone late swaps and everyone's having fun on Sundays, but
yeah. I was wondering if you build like a Garendo McBride, who is the pair pivot with Kittle. But yeah, that's something we can work offline.
is
All
it
right, y'all.
JSN?
It might be no, he's too expensive. 60. Oh,
What's McBride?
McBride is
6'1",
61. Yeah.
so you can't do it.
Yeah, just not enough. Almost.
It would have to be like, well, Keenan Allen's just too cheap, right? Like, it's just too cheap to get there.
Well, yeah, and I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Because there's only the 3 games at 4:00, so
Yeah. You're
it would
only
have
looking
to
at
be maybe then, like, I don't know. Does DK get you there?
probably DK. No, he's only 100 less than JSN. He's 6.2.
Arr. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can't do it.
Khalil Shakir. We're reaching here.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, y'all. This was searching for ceiling. I almost said the slate. This is searching for ceiling for week 14. As always, he is Rich. I am Hilow. Again, head on over to 1 Week Season. Get signed up for Inner Circle. You get all the theoretical stuff tomorrow. Head on over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Get signed up using code TAKE25 for 25% off anything they got over there. And until next week, y'all, we will see you at the top of the leaderboards. Peace.
1 Week Season.